Shalom, everyone. My name is Cody Baynert, and today I'm going to be discussing my thoughts on the latest record from Loscil and Lawrence English titled Colors of Air. Both of these artists have been very prominent figures in experimental and ambient music for the past couple of decades now. Loscil, which is the alias for Vancouver-based ambient artist Scott Morgan, has been making some really minimalistic yet deep-sounding music. And while he has a very consistently strong discography, I've been finding his more recent output to be probably the best work that he has done to date, with some phenomenal records such as Sea Island, Monument Builders, and 2021's Clara, which actually made it to my top 10 albums of that year. And so naturally, I was very excited for whatever new project that he would, at the very least, be involved in to some degree. And in this case, he is collaborating with the incredibly prolific avant-garde artist as well as the Room 40 record label honcho, Lawrence English from Australia, whose discography I was personally not as familiar with leading up to this record, but I did do some research on his stuff in preparation for it. And to my knowledge, his music ranges from very melancholic and relaxing ambient drone to stuff that just challenges musical norms altogether, such as last year's Viento, which is 35 minutes of wind recordings. And so I realized and understood why these two artists would have musical chemistry, especially after reading the description for this record. As a direct quote from a press release, born of a conversation centered on the notion of rich sources as a forge for electronic music, Colors of Air is a collection of recordings of a century-old pipe organ housed at the historic Old Museum at Brisbane, Australia, which were then processed, transformed, and elevated into 8 majestic electroacoustic threshold devotionals. The tracks are named for the hue each piece suggests, from the gauzy levitational miasma of yellow to the pulsating melancholic mirage of violet to the seething twilit sandstorm of magenta. Very much sounds like the type of thing that either artist would want to make. And so this became, honestly, one of my most anticipated releases of this year, and it blew me away. Damn, this thing is good. As the press release mentions, every track feels like it represents a different hue or shade. And while the tracks may follow a somewhat similar formula and song structure, the way they experiment with and explore timbre with samples from this century-old pipe organ results in a surprisingly varied and provocative collection of sounds that indeed makes this whole thing a very colorful listen as a whole. Opening track Cyan is a really great example of what I mean. The track opens up with these bright, pulsating chords that already have my attention, and I love the way this track continuously builds and expands on these chords, where we have some rhythmic beats that do feel very signature Loscil, while both artists just introduce layer after layer of new sounds that result in a really expansive piece that brings to my mind imagery of ethereal jellyfish on a very vast-looking oceanic backdrop. Well, it is tricky for me to describe the way that the following 3 tracks, Aqua, Yellow, and Gray, differentiated each other because they do so in subtle ways. Those subtleties are genuinely enough to make them stand out, and again, make them feel like they're symbolically representing some sort of different hue or shade, which is makes me realize this is pretty much just Synesthesia, the Ambient album, and I'm all in for that. Towards the back end of this record, we have the song Black, which is the lengthiest and probably most patience-testing track on this record. It is 9 minutes of these very dark sounding chords that swell and expand before the track reaches a high point around the middle before slowly dying back down to where it started at the beginning. And I love this song. I am addicted to the way that their ambient soundscapes swell and expand in the way that I described. And even though I don't have synesthesia myself or anything like that, I can definitely see why they named this track after the color black. For it very much feels like it is sonically representing the sense of vast expanse that the color black can create, which is the type of thing that one would find from, say, photographs of our solar system's planets in the middle of literally just a black void. I do find that the timbre of the following track, Pink, resembles a traditional church organ the most, giving this song an almost gothic flavor that I do find quite eerie. The next song, Violet, which is also the record's lead single, does feel the most to me like a typical Loscil track, with these very off-kilter rhythms and beats, as well as the way that these chords chime in this almost bell-like manner. And the album's closing track, Magenta, is driven by this very tense and ominous triplet rhythm that feels even more eerie thanks to these very creepy descending notes that seem to come and go at will. Now, admittingly, this record does feel a little bit more, to me at least, like a Loscil record than it does a Lawrence English record. I can definitely pick up on some of Lawrence English's contributions to these songs, especially on the aforementioned song Black. Although it is maybe a little bit tricky for me to pick up on when it comes to every song, which is not at all a massive criticism, because even though I might not be able to hear his influence if I didn't know about it in advance, it still makes sense to me that he would add or iterate on or augment different sounds or timbres that Loscil would attempt to create, or maybe even start something that Loscil will add on top of later. I mean, I don't know the exact compositional and creative process that either artist went through, but the point is, this still feels to me like a collaboration between these two artists regardless. Another maybe minor criticism with this thing that isn't really that much of a problem, and in fact can be a pro when it comes to this, is how repetitive and patience testing these songs can get, which is, to be fair, kind of what you would expect from an album from either of these artists. However, some tracks tend to build and evolve very little over the course of their runtimes, especially the song Magenta. But the way that both of these artists explore timbre and sound is so fascinating that this is hardly an issue. And in fact, I do actually sometimes kind of like how excessively monotonous and repetitive their music can get, because they're such brilliant artists to make it so that it is easy and also enjoyable to get lost in their music. Their soundscapes are so brilliantly and expertly crafted and produced. Yeah, this thing is great. I love this album. And the more I listen to it, the more it actually has been growing on me, resulting in what I imagine will remain one of the best ambient albums of 2023. And I know they do have competition for Tim Hecker and Alluvium, and Imaginary Softwoods have new records on the way. But this is definitely the best ambient album that I think I have heard so far. And so, yeah, those are my thoughts on the latest collab record from Loscil and Lawrence English. What did you think of this record? Did you listen to it? If so, please feel free to discuss your thoughts on it in the comments down below, as well as any constructive criticism on my own review. And also, please feel free to give a like and subscribe and comment. And I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye.